Good morning and welcome to Rising. Got another fantastic show for you today. Will Jawando and Malik Abdul are in for panel and will weigh in on Biden's latest polling numbers, which are not great. And Kim Iverson, of course, will join us later on.
But first, the Brooklyn subway shooting suspect, Frank James, was caught and taken into custody yesterday in Manhattan. Mayor Adams celebrated the arrest of James during a remote press conference, saying, quote, "My fellow New Yorkers, we got him." Adams is currently in quarantine after testing positive for COVID.
But it wasn't the NYPD who caught him. It was a 21-year-old man from Syria working as a security guard for a shop near Manhattan's East Village who spotted James on the cameras on his way to work. Here's how the man, Zach Tahan, described the scene.
What happened is I was working inside that store. I do security cameras. And I was watching in the street like how I see how the camera look. Like we was doing the adjustment. And I see this guy, he did the problem. And I was two days I don't sleep when I see the people die like this from this guy. And nobody catch him. Look how many people have in New York, nobody catch him. Like I was working inside that store and I catch him.
It's nice to see like just a guy having like the best day of his life after a genuinely well-deserved heroic moment.
I love New York. I miss New York. The idea of like basically your favorite, bodega scenario ending up being the one that actually catches it. And look, to a lot of our reporting yesterday in our interview with Oleyemi, at the end of the day, it is kind of a damning reality that despite having an almost $11 billion police budget, officers on every corner standing around posted up at every subway station, it was this guy and his eagle eye that just happened to catch the guy.
Yeah, it's hard to... what else can you say?
Big points for community defending, community policing.
A lot of police out there didn't catch him, but this guy did. So I don't know what else to say. It's a good thing that he's caught. Eric Adams had like a kind of we got him.
Yes.
Sort of. Not that this wasn't this bad guy who did a very very bad thing. But it's not Osama bin Laden. I don't know. There was a kind of. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. He is the kind of guy who is going to try to capitalize on a moment like this, and maybe that's not fair. Maybe every mayor would try to use this as an opportunity to see the
but he's got a tough guy. I'm the sheriff.
Right. Right, and it's especially
swagger.
Inappropriate in a lot of people's view because who is the we? I saw a lot of people responding to that tweet saying, who is the we exactly? Right. And we caught him because you literally didn't do it. And, there was reporting that, the suspect had been called in and identified. But before the police could even get to the scene, the civilian was able to identify him first, which also really begs the question, why is the responsiveness rate so slow? Why did it even come to this in the first instance? And there's some people who are even saying that the reluctance to really honor Zach is all about trying to keep him from getting I think it's a $50,000 reward. I hope that's not the case, because he certainly deserves it.
And did he have prior arrests? I thought I saw that maybe he did. The
suspect?
Yeah.
I believe I saw that he had been investigated by the FBI, looked at the FBI, and then cleared. Right, so it's another
that's so frustrating.
Slipping through the cracks moment of these institutions.
Yeah, or like not even slipping through, like was on top of the cracks, had not fallen through them, and then was like shoved through them by the FBI. Because that was the same case, and I've mentioned this on the show numerous times because I followed the Parkland school shooting. I reported on a lot. And that guy, in that horrific Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting, he was reported to the FBI.
Yeah.
He was reported to the school authorities. He was reported to the sheriff's department. Every person who was supposed to see something, say something, they saw something and they said something, and they said, this kid is going to be a mass shooter. Can you do something about it? And law enforcement didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Which is pretty frustrating. And then they say, we need more resources, we need more of a police state, and et cetera. But you don't. You miss the stuff you're supposed to catch when everybody does what they're supposed to do, when the citizens do. It's very frustrating. Very frustrating.
It's very frustrating.
Yeah.
I won't say the word defund because I don't want to trigger anybody, but the funding isn't working.
The fund, let's not fund. I don't know what we can neither defund nor fund. I guess sit here and complain about it, I guess. All right, well, we're going to get into some other big news that happened yesterday. President Biden approved another $800 million in additional military aid to the Ukraine, including transfer of helicopter artillery systems and armored vehicles. Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby told reporters why the U.S. signed over the additional aid. Let's watch.
It's the first time that we've provided these 155 howitzers and the associated rounds that'll go with them. And again, that's reflective of the kind of fighting that the Ukrainians are expecting to be faced with here in this little bit more confined geographic area. They specifically asked for fire support and specifically asked for artillery support.
This comes as the World Bank is preparing to deliver $1.5 billion in aid to Ukraine.
Yeah, so more support for Ukraine, which, look, obviously, I mean, I don't know. I think maybe we disagree slightly on this. Kim and I disagree on this. I am basically fine to continue giving them weapons but we should be putting diplomatic pressure on them, obviously, to actually settle something with Vladimir Putin.
Well, this is the tension.
Right.
Does providing more weapons facilitate a shorter diplomatic process? Does it make it more likely for parties to come to the bargaining table? Or does it elongate the process because Zelensky is under the impression that he can win the war or hold off Russia for a longer period of time, when anyone who looks at the military abilities of these two respective countries understands that ultimately it's just a matter of time for, obviously, Russia, the military power that it is, the nuclear superpower that it is, will ultimately prevail. Now, to what end, how much of the country, can it take the whole country without use of the kind of force that would trigger the involvement of Western allies? That's all up in the air. But I think it's a really interesting philosophical question of, is the real thing that's driving this an unwilling to make the kinds of compromises that are ultimately bound to happen?
Right, but ultimately they are being invaded, and they're the ones playing defense. So it's a little different than the just kind of arming people. I know this is a proxy war in some sense, but it's one that Russia started. So I don't have the moral. There's less of a moral struggle to they are wrongly being invaded. So it would be better to bring this war, obviously, to an end as fast as possible, but that needs to end with Russia ending the war. Like, Russia is the one doing the thing.
There is an open debate about this. There is no debate about the fact that Russia invaded Ukraine, and that's a violation of international law. It is also true that many people pinpoint the beginning of this war as someplace other than the invasion, and they see it primarily as a proxy war, and America has been the proxy party that has been instigating the kinds of diplomatic maneuvers that, from some people's point of view, have all but provoked Russia into a situation that they're in because their back is up against the wall. Now, obviously, reasonable minds disagree about that, but the fact of the matter is that that perspective is largely absent from mainstream media, and it is now largely absent from even alternative media, as the Russian state perspective that you were able to find on places like RT are now banned from much of the internet. And that's a concern, because even if you disagree with the Russian perspective, I think it's important for Americans to know what they're up against and what the thought process is of those who they are hoping to deter from continued aggression through the provision of additional aid. And I think the other question that really gets left out of this is, even if you believe in every way, shape, or form, morally, strategically, etc., that Ukraine is in the right, that they need to have weapons to defend Russia, there is this secondary kind of imperialist question of what role should America continue to play as the world's policeman. And some people might think, Donald Trump certainly thought, we were overly involved in Europe. We were basically funding the military ability of an entire continent while their people enjoyed any number of social programs, and that there was a reasonable question of why we were intervening in Europe in these kinds of circumstances, but not intervening in other places in the rest of the world where there is an equal level of tragedy on an ongoing basis.
That's a fair point. Well, we also learned yesterday from President Zelensky that the country captured Viktor Medvedchuk, a pro-Kremlin politician who was living in the Ukraine, allegedly escaped his house arrest shortly after Russia launched its invasion. This morning, Ukraine is saying they hit a Russia warship off the Crimean coast, as Russian officials said a fire caused them to evacuate the ship that was severely damaged. However, reports are conflicting as to what actually happened, as they so often are. It's hard from where we are to make sense, just like you said, and that's a downside of having this situation where, we're canceling, we're deplatforming any of the pro-Russian voices. I mean, this show is one of the only places you can hear. Like Kim talked about on her radar yesterday, she just said, well, here is what Putin is telling his people. I think that it's lies, but we should know what they're telling them, or what the Russian people think.
Yeah, so many people noted. I interviewed Abby Martin on my show, and she was pointing to the fact that if but for RT, she would have taken a lot longer to realize all of the kind of Ghost Island stuff and some of the early stories coming out of the conflict were in fact fake. And it was, for better or worse, Russian television sources that were reporting on some of the misinformation that took forever to trickle down to the rest of the Western media sphere because there is not that openness to what the alternative perspectives are.
Yeah. No, it's a huge problem. And we have just been speedily going down this path of saying, nope, we're not going to hear any of it. And it's one thing to, I guess, do the sanctions and not want to do direct, although I have a lot of skepticism about the sanctions, as we talked about with our friend Judd Legum yesterday. But to not even be able to consume just information about what's going on over there, what they think.
Are we so insecure?
Right. It can warp our perception of the war. It does warp our perception of the war. And we don't want to be, we don't want to be overconfident. I do think the Russian military has, from looking at all sources and what they say, it looks to me like the Russian military has badly underperformed during the course of this invasion, and it's been really bad for them. But like you said, that doesn't mean they're going to lose. That doesn't mean there are more forces they could commit to this thing. So we don't want to, because we're not listening to what Russia says, be overconfident and then be, subtly or not so subtly urging Zelensky to hold on until I think Kim called it a last man standing in Ukraine kind of scenario.
Right. That is the worst case scenario, it seems.
Yeah, that would be bad. Well, we'll tell you what's on our radars coming up next. Stay with us.